through the lot, now you know I'm coming through. When the growth look good on you, best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Table turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keep dealing me cards, I keep feeling it.
What is going on, people? We're back in the building and we are back with another Scout Watch. Now, today's Scout Watch isn't necessarily someone who, to my knowledge, who is linked with Liverpool Football Club. Just a player that, you know, has been talked about quite a lot this season. Plays for Real Sociedad. Very, very good defensive midfielder. Obviously playing the 6, can play in the 8 as well, but I think the 6 really is his best position, and that is Martin Zubimendi. Now, before we even dive in, guys, you already know the deal. Please make sure that you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the damn channel if you are brand new. Now, let's dive into it, man. Let's dive into it. So, Martin Zubimendi, as I mentioned, can play in that 6 position, has played, I think he's appeared also as a centre-back maybe a couple of times, maybe just to fill in a role, play in that 8 position. But it's like I said, that number 6 position, I feel, is really his best position. He's had a really, really good season, you know, for Real Sociedad this season. He's played 44 times, scored 1 goal, got himself 4 assists in all competitions. He's played all but 2 league games in La Liga, 4 Europa League games, 4 Copa del Rey games. Again, he is a player actually who has got a little bit of bite to him as well. He has got 14 yellow cards this season, hasn't been sent off for Real Sociedad this season. So again, one of those kind of players, man. He's I don't want to say a weird one, because he isn't really that much that weird, if I'm being totally honest with you, but weird in the sense of it's very difficult really to put like a real definition, so to speak, in terms of when someone asks, oh, what type of player, if you've never seen him play, you know, kind of thing, you're like, oh, well, who does he play like? Well, if I'm being totally honest, he plays like a range of players, and I think that for me is also quite key. You know, again, you've got players like Rodri. I think he does play a little bit, you know, like him. You've got players like Busquets. You know, again, I think he plays a little bit like him. Xabi Alonso, you know, former Real Sociedad midfielder, obviously now turned manager for Bayern Leverkusen. So, you know, he's kind of got a mixture of all 3 players. And the reason why I use these 3 players is he's one of those players, I guess, you'd probably say, yes, he is almost a bit like a Xabi Alonso, so to speak. But in today's, would I say, modern football, he has got the shades of a Sergio, you know, Busquets, you know, someone who can play in that 6th position, doesn't look out of place, you know, doesn't need to be too heavily involved, you know, either in the defensive transitions or in the attacking phases. He just looks calm. He just does his job. You know, again, a lot of people, most people rate obviously Sergio Busquets, but, you know, I know a lot of people who don't, you know, in terms of saying, you know, he's not all that and things like that, which again, you know, it's fair enough. It's your opinion. You know, it's one of those kind of things. But I think with someone like Sergio Busquets, someone who's very good at cutting the passing lanes, someone whose football IQ is absolutely out of this world, you know, his reading of the game, absolutely superb. And I think when you don't notice your defensive midfielder, for me, that's always it's a great thing, you know, like that should be the kind of key for defensive midfielders. You know, it doesn't really matter what team you play for, because the reality is, if you're not noticing them, that means they're doing something right. You know, that means they're just going about their job. They're doing their thing. I don't need to know that you're getting this many tackles. I don't need to know that, you know, you're putting challenges here, you know, left, right, and center. I don't need to know that you're, you know, getting the ball and doing all of these amazing things that, you know, we want, you know, most of our players to kind of do. I don't necessarily need to kind of see all of those, you know, all of those things. And again, that's why I then say he's got kind of like shades of Rodri, because Rodri, again, another player whose football IQ completely out of this world, plays for Pep Guardiola's team. So he is the more defensive player within that midfield. You know, he's the one who cuts the passing lanes. He's the one who kind of harasses players in that middle of the park. He's the one who put the challenges, you know, about. I wouldn't, you know, Zubimendi can, you know, put the challenges about, but that's not really where I see the shades. It's just more, again, the reading of the game, the positioning, you know, of where the positions he takes up, you know, in matches and things like that, being able to play in these tight spaces, you know. all of those kind of things are the reasons why I feel like he has the shades, and he can pick out a pass. He's a very, very good passer of the ball. Hence why I then put in, Xabi Alonso, because he can pick out that pass, from deep. He's someone who, again, he does like to find those pockets of spaces as well. So bit of an all. He's got the mixture. Now I'm not trying to say he's all three and then he's going to be this superb player. He might be. Time will tell in regards to that. But he has got that kind of attributes from all three of these kind of players. And, again, like I said, with the season that he's had with Real Sociedad this season, it's only going up and up. And I know a lot of clubs do like him. It's just whether or not that they're able to actually get him, which might be, the sticking point, within this. But, I guess it's one of those kind of things. It's a long summer. You never really know. If he does stay with Real Sociedad, it's not going to be a bad thing. They are a good team. They are a team who are, working their way back up into, some level of, would I say, European contention in terms of the Champions League and things like that. So, it's going to be interesting to see, how he develops in the future. But when we're looking at, all the boring stuff, the things that don't matter, as they say, we're looking at his stats, his metrics and things like that. You can, to be honest with you, doesn't look fantastic. People look at a successful take-ons, stuff like that, doesn't really make for, would I say, great reading, so to speak. Where he kind of excels and is someone who you would probably look at in that defensive six position. Aerial duels, clearances, blocks, interceptions, all of these kind of things. Again, things that you probably would prefer to associate with a defensive midfielder, if I'm being totally honest with you. He isn't someone who's going to pick up the ball and, dribble past six players and then, pop it off. And, if I do this, no. He's much simpler than that. He is a player that is going to, pick up the ball, move it, pick up the ball, move it, pick up the ball, move it. He picks up the ball from, the defense, from the goalkeeper, potentially from the centre backs. Again, he just moves the ball off. He isn't someone who's going to hang around with that ball. So, don't expect him to see, like I said, he's someone I feel goes unnoticed within these kind of, midfields. If you then move on, you can see he's an option. So obviously this is stats by The Athletic. Just taking a look, at Zubimendi in terms of his where he receives passes, where he's an option for players in games. You can see on that left kind of half space, that's kind of where, mostly he will do that. You can see from the 21-22 season, and then on the right, you can see the 22-23 season. Again, most predominantly in that kind of left half space, the space that Liverpool kind of need to fill. But again, it's just one of those things. And I think it goes back to, I did a show the other day, and I asked everybody, what's your type of midfielder? What type of midfielder do you think Liverpool need? And, a lot of people mention, destroyers in the middle. I know a lot of people want to Ugarte, former Sporting Lisbon player. We're linked with Gravenberch, we were, should I say, linked to Gravenberch, we're linked to Romeo Lavia and stuff like that. In my opinion, when I look at, say, a Zubimendi and a Lavia, Zubimendi's a more experienced player, so that he obviously has that. But he is, in my opinion, the version that Lavia kind of wants to get to, and it goes back to, previous conversations where I mentioned about getting ready-made players as opposed to getting players with potential and stuff like that. Now, don't get twisted. Lavia is a fantastic player. We all know his capabilities. We all know the type of individual that he is at this current moment in time, and that he looks like he's got quite a lot of promise, in the future. But again, when I look at Zubimendi, he does more or less the exact same things. Maybe not so much in terms of progressive passes and stuff like that. But again, does he need to do that? Will he need to do that? And this isn't me trying to say, let's just forget Romeo Lavia or anything like that, because again, like I said, he is a very, very good player. It's just more about what type of midfielder do you think works within that midfield, because they're both very, very similar, do very, very similar roles. Now, would you not prefer to get the ready-made player as opposed to, again, another project, someone who may or may not, come to fruition and things like that? Or would you prefer to get the guy who can do it today? Would you prefer to get the guy who is genuinely going to challenge a Fabinho in that defensive midfield position? And then there's no excuse of, but he's still young. The same excuse that we give to, say, a Harvey Elliott or a Bajcetic, because of their age, we want to allow them to make mistakes and things like that, which is, of course, fine, because that is just football. But the reality is, are we in that position to do so? again, it kind of remains to be seen, if I'm being, totally honest with you. You can hear at his touch map, again, like I mentioned, again, in that sixth position, uh, that's where most of his game is going to be played. But I kind of like that, to be honest with you. He can play those half spaces, but at the same time, just because he can play in those half spaces, I don't necessarily always need to, see him in there, in terms of further up the pitch. You can even see when he is further up the pitch, it's only 2% on the right hand side, 3 in the middle, 3 on the left, kind of thing. So he's going to be someone who will stay mostly in his position, and it's just more about the build-up play, keeping the ball ticking. Again, those kind of players, depending on the system that you play, can be very, very important. Just taking a look here, obviously, at his heat map. Just more basically what I've just been saying about where you're going to find him in the areas of the pitch that he is, I would say, most effective, kind of thing. Playing in a 4-2-3-1 system, for Real Sociedad, again, in that kind of whatever you want to call him, a deep line playmaker or just a defensive midfielder, an anchor man, whatever, whatever floats your boat. That's just what he is. But for me, he can also play in the pivot role, in the 6 role by himself. And I find that, very, very important. When I look at some of these other players that we've been linked with, most importantly for me, I'm like, it's all well and good being able to play in a double pivot if that's what the team are going to consistently play. But if we don't play in that, can you play by yourself? Can we trust you to play by yourself, in that position? Are you good enough to play by yourself in that position? I don't really think so. But I feel like Zubimendi is. I feel like he is a player who can play, in that kind of role. Just a couple photos here. Again, just the positions that he's taking up. You can see he's forming a little bit of a triangle with the centre backs. The centre back's obviously about to pop that over to the right winger. Right winger then going to pop that back into Zubimendi. And again, creating that triangle of space. Now, he's a lot more comfortable on the ball than a Fabinho. He's better on the ball than a Fabinho. I would say Fabinho, obviously at his best, probably a better defensive midfielder, maybe at his best. Fabinho is someone who kind of snaps into challenges and things like that. So if that's kind of something that you want, then absolutely no problem. Just a little bit of reading, sorry guys. In regards to the type of role that he can play, he may potentially play, in a future team. Zubimendi is the cog between the defense and the midfield, the spare man Real Sociedad need to win these mini battles and move into space that has been created by their press baiting build up. So obviously, just like that photo, that I put up there before, looking at the pockets of space, much like Busquets, Zubimendi's movement is elusive and often understated. He will always look to position himself in pockets of space to receive the pass between 2 players. And they were talking about the game that he played against Atletico Madrid. So again, when I'm looking at someone like him, for me it just all comes down to what type of midfielder do you want within your team. Now obviously I support Liverpool, so of course I'm going to kind of relate it back to there. But if I'm just looking at a team who want good build-up play, when we're talking about someone who can play at the base of a midfield, so we're looking at the Caicedos as an example. A lot of clubs obviously would love to have Caicedo in their team. They see what he can do. He's someone who picks up the ball off the centre backs. He's comfortable picking the ball up, under pressure and things like that. He's able to get himself out of these kind of situations, draw players in, which then creates further space, either, just behind him, either on the left, either on the right. All of these kind of things is because they then want, obviously, a goalkeeper who can play out from the back, centre backs who can play out from the back, all these kind of various different things. If you then want someone like that, someone who's then equally then good when it comes to picking the ball or picking his head up and then picking out a pass, Zubimendi is definitely a player that, I feel that more people should potentially be looking at. Again, not saying that people aren't looking at him. I do believe that Arsenal maybe had a slight interest in him, maybe in January, but I don't think Real Sociedad were really ready to let him go. And I believe his release clause is pretty high. So, that doesn't sound like something that is going to be coming to fruition, if I'm being totally honest with you. As I mentioned before, when he does get the ball in these positions, he's very good at then, eye of the needle passes, able to thread that pass through into the attacker or onto the on running inside forward or right winger, whatever kind of position you want to kind of name him. But he's good at finding those kind of passes. So for me, again, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, cool. fair enough on the ball. And again, for Real Sociedad, especially, I mentioned there before about the type of team that Real Sociedad, are and or how they've played this season. They are a press team. They will try to press you. Then when you've got other players, in the attacking third of the pitch who like to press from the front, and then you've got someone like Zubimendi who's almost the janitor. That's probably the best word to say. It's almost like the janitor, someone who can just clean up when he needs to, someone who can make sure that if the press does then beat the first line of defense, which is the attack, perfect, no worries, I'm there, I'm always in the right position. I'm it's going to be very rare that I'm then going to get beaten behind that. The goals are not going to come necessarily through the middle. It might come from wide areas, so to speak. But it is just one of those kind of things. You can see picking up the ball again from those centre backs, again creating that kind of triangle with the centre backs plus the right winger in the on this occasion. But he does it also on the left hand side. Look at the options for him to pass the ball into. He's obviously got the ball now, but he's got 1, 2, 3 options in which he can pop the ball into and then get himself back into the right position. He takes so much care of the ball, and I think that's one of the main things that I like, about him. Just back here again, with more time on the ball, the 24-year-old is an effortless distributor, particularly good at clipping the ball out wide to allow his teammates to take it down and accelerate away in one touch. And he's just someone you're not going to notice this kind of player in games. You're really going to have to really analyze someone like this. You're really going to have to you're going to be really looking for a player who's quite specific, and that's what he is. And I also think that's exactly how I mentioned before, Sergio Busquets. Maybe not so much as Xabi Alonso, but also even a Rodri. Now, I'm not saying people didn't know about Rodri, but I wouldn't have sat here and said that people were calling Rodri, one of the better or best defensive midfielders even prior to his move to Manchester City. Obviously, the move to Manchester City elevated him up, but I wouldn't have thought that people would be thinking that purely because when he was playing for Atletico Madrid, he was just doing his job. He was just doing his job. He was the janitor. He was the janitor within that team. The attacking players go out there. You guys press from the front, just like Diego Simeone wants. When you guys press from the front, if the team beats that press, guess what? If it then gets to midfield and it beats that press, guess what? I'm there. I can then mop it up. And when I do mop it up, when I get the ball, I'm not going to be someone who gets the ball, panics a little bit, and might play a dodgy pass back into the centre backs or a dodgy pass out wide. No, I've got the ball skills to be able to play. I've got the dribbling ability. I've got the technique. I can get myself away from these defenders or from the opposition and then play a pass. It's not going to be a problem. And that's exactly why I feel like Zubimendi might be maybe a little bit underrated in that kind of sense, in terms of, when we're looking at all of these other midfielders, in a general sense, people are getting gassed and excited about all these other players. He's better than a lot of these guys. But again, it just depends on what you want from your defensive midfielder. Because, of course, if you then genuinely just want a destroyer, then fair enough. Just looking here. More to the point, Zubimendi's athleticism and defensive instinct make him an excellent sweeper for when his side loses the ball and concedes a quick counterattack. While he doesn't possess searing pace, his ability to read the game means he's rarely out of position, only taking drastic action when absolutely needed. And again, it's just talking about his football IQ. Very, very good. For someone who's not, in my opinion, not really been, I would say more this obviously the 22-23 season just gone, maybe a bit of the previous season, but more the 22-23 season where he's really elevated his game. But also the reason why I feel like maybe he might be getting a bit more notice is because of the way that teams are trying to play. They want to build from the back. You see how Man City, how Brighton, how Arsenal like to build from that back. So because they want to build from the back, they need to have defensive midfielders. They need to have defenders who are ball playing, who are comfortable on the ball, don't know and understand when to release it. Brighton do it really, really well in terms of, you've seen Levi Colwill this season. And also if you watch the Euros, you've seen when he gets the ball, he puts the ball under his foot, on his studs, under his foot, waits for someone to come in and then pops it off. That's then time for the defensive midfielder to get himself in a position to be able to receive that pass. Now, again, when the defensive midfielder receives that pass, in Brighton's team anyway, so for example, Caicedo or McAllister, when he's dropping a little bit deeper, they need to be super comfortable picking up that pass under serious pressure, because usually other teams have then got another player running in. Zubimendi, it's the same thing for real. So it's literally the exact same thing, carbon copy in terms of their build-up play, not the rest of it, but just in terms of their build-up play. Zubimendi then is comfortable enough to get himself out of those tight situations. Do you know what I mean? He's got the sense of awareness to understand where it is the opposition are coming from. You know, where do I then need to play that pass? He's already thinking about that pass when he's gotten the ball because of obviously the other movement from their from his teammates. So again, man, a very, very good player, man. Very, very good player. As the player most often at the base of La Rea's midfield, there's a lot of responsibility on Zubimendi to both secure the offensive threat ahead of him and sustain the control in midfield. In possession, that means limiting turnovers while circulating the ball and avoiding giveaways that would put the team in a compromised shape. How to balance the team on both sides of the ball is his permanent pursuit, and one which he has learned to blend with greater success by this season. So you can see, man, he's really, really coming to the fore, and I think he's a lot more ready, so to speak, in terms of obviously it's difficult because Real Sociedad are a decent team. You know, they have performed pretty well, you know, in that 22-23 season. So I'm not really advocating for him to leave, but he was an interesting player to look at, and he was a player that not many Liverpool fans are realistically looking at, you know, especially if we're going to be playing with this kind of new Trent inverted role, and we want potentially someone alongside of Fabinho who is still decent enough to, you know, help out defensively. You know, he's very, very mobile, can get himself about the pitch, but is comfortable on the ball. That's when I'm looking at other players, you know, who else is around there in Europe, in South America, in Asia, whatever. You know, there must be other players as opposed to looking at a lot of these project players who I feel not really ready, if I'm being honest with you, to be playing for a club like Liverpool Football Club with the pressure that they've got, and haven't really got that much experience at that kind of level. You know, I do find it a little bit difficult with some of these players. Obviously, of course, not to say that they can't do it. It's just more a case of, you know, deer in headlights for some of these players. You know, I feel like they'll get a massive shock playing for a club like Liverpool, and then also understanding that it's not going to be the same as when you're playing for, you know, other teams, you know, where, like a Southampton, as an example, you know, when you're playing for those kind of lower echelons of the league teams, you know, the football is going to be different purely because teams are not necessarily always going to come at you. You know, when you're playing for teams like a Nice or, you know, Southampton, as an example, teams are going to come at you because you know, they more often than not, they might be better than you in some cases, kind of thing. Whether they win or not is obviously down to the game itself, but these teams are going to come at you. So when they're coming at you, you either are good enough to be able to handle that kind of situation in terms of being a quick thinker, or you're someone who, because of the way that the team play and stuff like that, you know, you're going to have to play maybe a different type of game. When you're coming to a team like Liverpool or the Arsenals or the Cities, you know, the Man United and stuff like that, teams are not coming at you. They're dropping deep and they're sitting deep, you know, so it's all about what do you then do with the ball? You're going to have to take, you know, bigger care of the ball, and also understand that when it then, you know, as it mentioned there about him and the counter attacks, when the team is then, you know, counter attacked by the opposition, what do you do in those kind of moments? Because it's those moments that are going to probably be very, very key for these kind of big clubs, especially a team like Liverpool, because that's when Liverpool are probably at their biggest threat. You know, when the opposition are actually attacking and Liverpool win the ball back, boom. You need to be picking out the right pass. You need to understand where you need to be, because we will get caught out. Defensively, Liverpool are very, very poor. You know, so we're going to get caught out. In defensive transition, should I say, Liverpool are very, very, very poor. Like one of the poorest in the league, if I'm being totally honest with you, because of the gaps that we leave in the middle and in the wide areas, whether it be on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. We seem to leave quite a lot of areas, and we leave ourselves very, very open in those situations. We need someone who's smart enough to be able to fill those gaps. Could Zubimendi be that type of player? Me personally, I think he could. I personally think he could be, you know, that type of player, but, you know, it remains to be seen. Just talking about his high pressing, this is one of Zubimendi's persistent challenges at Real Sociedad. In a team who often look to man mark in midfield, typically in high pressing situations, he is constantly weighing up the threat level of various situations. When to be tight to his marker, when to lend a hand to the back four is a troubleshooting operation. He has become highly refined in judging. Something that I talk about with a Fabinho as an example is Fabinho seems, that might just be my makeup, to be fair. So if it is, then that's obviously a Klopp issue, you know, something that I don't understand why it doesn't happen. But we seem to have none of our defensive midfielders seem to slot back into the centre back role. It's very, very, very weird. We expect Trent to kind of play two roles at once, whatever. But then you're getting, you know, Fabinho, I never ever see him drop back into the back three. But all the other teams who play with the back three or use a back three, so to speak, or with the inverted players, their defensive midfielder always drops back in. So it doesn't leave them so open, for the counter attack. Whether we get counter attacked or not, cool, whatever. But we don't then look so open. We've already got two players back there. Two players are trying to then cover centre back plus the wide position. So you've got Van Dijk trying to cover centre back and left back, and then Konate trying to cover centre back and right back. Why have you not got someone else in the middle there to slot back in and help out? So the players are not too stretched. I feel like that's probably the most common sense thing I could think of. But it seems to be something that isn't that much common. Hasn't got that much common sense because Klopp doesn't ever seem to do it, and Fabinho is not doing it. So one of the two are making a mistake in that. But as they mention all the time, high risk, high reward. But sometimes it's just common sense and stupidity. It really is a simple thing. You just need to get one of them to drop back. We don't need everybody up the field. We really don't. The game never really requires everybody to be that far high up. In the on the field, especially last season, the way that we was playing and the way that we just looked so vulnerable. When the opposition kind of had the ball and there was space, out wide. Yeah, definitely something that needs to be sorted out. But Zubimendi, definitely a good player. I'll call him maybe a deep lying playmaker, to be honest with you. Defensive side of things, he's okay. He is okay. He's not the worst, but he's definitely not the best in that kind of sense. But he's very, very smart in that position. And I think if it all depends on the type of football that you are obviously trying to play and trying to implement. Me personally, you guys already know the type of style of football I like is the Manchester City style, or the Pep Guardiola style, should I say. Let me not even say Manchester City. It's more the Pep Guardiola style, which is we care more about the ball than we do the running and things like that. As opposed with Liverpool, it's more we care about the running than we do the ball. The ball is constantly zipping around here, there, and everywhere, and it's just fast movements and this, that, which obviously works and is absolutely fine. And, it's just preference and stuff like that. But me, I like the fact that you're able to keep possession with a purpose. Liverpool, I always feel, never really keep possession with a purpose. It's just idly knocking the ball, around at the back and then hoping that, someone makes a darting run or, someone is able, like Trent, for example, is able to find like a 60-yarder, somebody, it's quite basic in my personal opinion. I love the fact that players are so intelligent in that Manchester City team that they're never ever standing still in the same positions. That midfield that they usually have, whoever's in there, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, Foden, Rodri, Rico Lewis, John Stones, whoever it is, constant movement. Liverpool's only movement comes from their wingers. Do you know what I mean? It's like, all right, fair enough. If they don't move, Liverpool's team doesn't. It looks very, very, like I say, basic, stale, static. I need to see, can we start playing more of that kind of total football? For me, I feel like, not that we have to move into that because there's more than one way to skin a cat, but I just feel that with certain players that we've got, the Harvey Elliott's, Carvalho's obviously gone out on loan, Thiago, more technical players, we need to get away from this. We need industry. That word is a filthy word. I absolutely hate it. We need to get away from that. We need to start understanding that we need to be playing a better style and brand of football because the running thing, in my opinion, isn't going to work, long term anymore. Teams have wised up to it. It is too easy to more or less play against. So I just think that maybe we need to start changing the way that we do play. And maybe that might change now that we've got McAllister in, Zoboslai, maybe that might change. But at that base of the midfield, we need to make sure that we get it right this summer. And Zubimendi is definitely a player who I feel deep line playmaker, someone who can control a midfield, by himself, in that sixth position, can also play alongside someone. So Trent, for example, in this case, someone who can take care of the ball, pick out a pass, reading of the game is really, really well. Movement is really, really good. Can find pockets of space when he needs to. All of these kind of attributes, I believe personally, that would be a very, very good signing. But it all just depends. But just as Zubimendi in a general sense, it just depends on the type of midfielder that you like. We all like different things. If you like a destroyer, no problem. I do like a good destroyer every now and again. Ugarte might have been a good player to have, but I do like playing football. So Zubimendi is definitely someone that I think more teams are going to probably potentially look at if he stays at Real Sociedad this season. So in the 23-24 season, let's see how he obviously develops. But yeah, it is one of those kind of things. So we're just gonna have to realistically wait and see. But guys, there you have it. That is today's Scout Watch. Martin Zubimendi, the deep line playmaker, Real Sociedad. As you can see in the caption on the screen, the Gen Z version of Sergio Busquets and Xabi Alonso. I really do think that he is. But again, let's not go too overboard because those players are absolutely fantastic, world-class individuals. I'm not saying that he is a world-class individual, but he has got a lot of similarities to those players, and also including Rodri, who is a world-class player. Let me know what you guys obviously think in the comments. Is he a player that you guys have watched this season? Is he a player that you like? Is he a player that you think can fit in our team? If not, what type of team do you think he could go to? You know, the other shouts for me are obviously Arsenal, obviously Manchester City, Brighton, but I don't think he would go down a level in that kind of sense. He'd be better off just staying at Real Sociedad, unless Brighton obviously come up a level. If Brighton was to get like top 4 next season, he's the player that they should sign. Like, most definitely he's a player, you know, that they should sign. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Martin Zubimendi, I'm G, Scout Watch done, and I am out.